Okay, so this may be the worst class I ever give. And when there weren't many people, I thought, great. But then it filled up a little more. It may not be, but because I kind of want to wing it, but there's a lot of things I want to say. My heart is full of things to say to you guys, but I don't know how to say them. So the first thing I want to say is Jesus said, if you have ears to hear, let them hear. He who has ears to hear, let them hear. And right now, in this moment, it's always true, but it's especially true with us here in a circle or a square. The power is in the room and it's feeding you. Are you listening? Are you listening? Where is your mind and heart? If you're wrapped up in self, put it aside. Just put it aside and relax. And use your skin and your heart and your whole body as an antenna to just listen to it. To just listen. It's just relax and listen to it. Definitely very present in the room. And so listen, but be in the room. Don't go internal. Listen and be here. Don't go into absorption. Listen and be here. That's the thing. With everyone. The communal listening. Listening to the whole. And not just self, everyone. Everyone. And you can feel it. You can feel it in everyone. You can feel everyone. Because you're connected through God's power. That's why. Jesus says, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. I don't know what he meant for sure because I wasn't there. But I have to think he's looking around and people are doing things and they're not listening. And he's giving them the word of life and they're not listening. Someone might be writing it all down and now they have a record of the words, but they weren't listening. They're not listening. So the word of life is always being spoken to us all the time. It never isn't. It never isn't. It is always being spoken. Are you listening? And it doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't. That's the thing about Jesus. It's so cool. What's so amazing about redemption, about Christ, about salvation, is that God became a human being, and that human being, Jesus, inserted himself in all of humanity's suffering, in all of humanity's sin, in all of humanity's hope, in all of humanity's goodness. There is nowhere you can go in your consciousness, nowhere, where Jesus isn't there with you. That's what's great about Jesus. You kind of can't miss. You could be running from Jesus, and you can just close your eyes and say, hey man, I'm just running away. I'm totally avoiding you. I'm not interested right now, but I'm just telling you that I'm not. And he is right there in that with you. As close as anywhere else you could be. There's nowhere that Jesus isn't. You can be in sorrow and grief, and you can say, here I am in grief, and there's Jesus in sorrow and grief with you. That's what makes it so great. You want to never lose sight of that. It's so powerful. It's so powerful, but so present. The whole thing about Jesus, about God incarnating, is to make God's power and life and being more present to us. That's the whole thing. And the language can be sometimes so harsh in the Old and New Testament. I remember when I started reading it, I was used to reading really fluffy books. And there's crucifixions and stonings, and they're trying to kill him, and he's fleeing, and they're carrying swords around. And I think, man, this is a rough world, and there's some harshness going on. But the message, you're completely and profoundly loved, and there's nowhere you can go to get away from it. There's nowhere God isn't with you, ever. You're always in it. That's faith. The thing about faith, you start to get faith, and you don't tune in and it feels ordinary. Sometimes when I tune into God, it feels ordinary. It doesn't feel mystical. It doesn't feel like joy or bliss or love or holy sorrow. Sometimes it feels ordinary, but I've noticed God is right there in that ordinary. It's right there. So listening, I think you listen and then give up because you don't feel something different, or I don't know what. Then you say, oh, it's not there. I'll just go about your day. It is there. It's always there. And when you come in here and it's sacred and we're all inviting into our hearts, I don't spy, but you can tell just by a person's countenance if they're listening or not. You can tell. Be listening. You think it's work, but it's less work. What you're doing when you're not listening, that's work. It's habitual, so it seems easy because you don't even have to do it. You just start thinking about resentments or shame or self-pity or whatever you're doing. Lust, whatever you're doing. It's like you don't have to try. It's just, it kind of is doing it. But it actually, that's a lot of work. And so you can just relax. You could just relax, and there it is. Just rest. And there it is. And that's your teacher, right? Like that's your Savior. That's Jesus. And it's all right there. And it's in the energies, the uncreated energies of God. And also sometimes the redemption and salvation is called a created energy because it's a very special energy that it wasn't an afterthought. It was known at the beginning of creation that it was going to be made, but that humans would need this extra touch, this extra intimacy, this extra love, this extra ease, whatever makes it better for you, softer, easier. It was known, the Trinity knew from the beginning, before you were created, that was going to be needed. They call that the created energy that Jesus created in his redemption. The new light, the new life, the new consciousness. And that's always there. It's always there. And so what's in the way of it? What is it? Well, it's everything you're doing on your own, happy or sad, excited or mad, It doesn't matter what it is. It's everything you're doing on your own, not with God. That's what's in the way. It's professionalism. And it's I don't know what, you name it. It's all the things you're doing instead, but not with God. Most of them good things. Most of it good. If you're having joy, you're hanging out with some friends and there's genuine joy, that's a true good. But it's in the way if it isn't with God. So think about it. So everything is about consciousness. Everything is about your state of consciousness, your state of being. And we've fallen from grace. We're far away. I mean, it just is true. My daughter and I had a big talk about, how could the Old Testament people think the way they thought? And they're talking to God, and God's telling them like the best God can tell them then, but it's not very bright sometimes. And did that really happen? And how could they be so far away? But then we thought about what about 2,000 years from now when everyone's pulling off miracles? They're going to think that about me and you. They're going to think that about you and I. Because we're progressing towards this closeness to God. And we're all asleep to it. We're asleep to it. So what's in the way is just whatever you're doing instead of being with God. That's all. That's all. But it's a little different, isn't it? It's also, you got to soften yourself, your heart. You relax your face, your mind. You relax everything. You're listening for this power. And then there's an active readiness to be doing what God is doing in you instead of what you are doing. That's what it is. And if you happen to be doing the thing God wants to help you do, God will just enter it with you then, and then that thing will be true and real. It'll be true and real. But if you're stubbornly doing something and the energy God is sending is different, to that extent you separate yourself from it. And that's the fall from grace. And the whole first hump you got to get over for, if you go in order, if you do the stages Jesus taught in the Beatitudes, if you do them in order, then the first hump is, the biggest one, because you're in total rebellion against God. I've had people say, look, I didn't care if I went left or right until I knew God had an opinion. And now I really want to go right when I want to go right. Like he said, when I was the one purifying myself, I found it easier. But now that there's someone showing me what to do and leading me, I find myself rebelling. And that's the first hump. I want what I want when I want it. I want to do, and it's pride. That's why Christianity thinks pride is at the root, not just ignorance, pride. We want to do it our way. And I remember feeling that way. At one point in my spirituality, I remember feeling, I won't even let God just help me drive home a certain way. I'm going to drive home the way I like to drive home. Just the drive home was rigid. It wasn't open. It was, I'm going to do what I'm doing. And that's just symbolic of every area of my life. None of it is sinful in itself, probably. None of it. I mean, some of it for sure, but the basic in and outs of life, not sinful, but totally self-will. Totally self-will. So that's sin. Then that is sin. And what's the consequence of it? I'm fighting God, and I'm keeping God out. That's the consequence of it. There's no punishment other than you're now separate and experiencing separation from God, and all because you want to do what? Why, like go left? I mean, think of how it is. It's crazy. It's so insane. It's insane. And that first hump of Christian spirituality, the very big first, the night, the first initiation, although you may not do them in order, you might do them all at the same time. It can be done perennially. It can be done holographically, so keep all that in mind, because you can't just say it just comes first and that's it, because we know that isn't true. But that first hump, if we talk about them as separate events, that first hump is a deep, deep, gut level, bone level surrender that says, okay, I will. I will. Even if you won't yet, but part of you, the deep part says, okay, I really will. That's all it is. That's all it is. Yes, I really will. And you might still go left. But it's a different kind of left. And I wanted to use the chanting last week as an explanation that is really important. I want you to try to understand this principle. So I thought I was going to have to teach you guys a lot more about chant. I'm reserving the right to make little corrections, but gee whiz, I'm shocked how easily it happened. We start with a chant that is pre-programmed. That's the idea, give you some form to use. But then the better thing is, how to say it? There's a chaos that happens when you loosen up and stop doing everything according to habit. Stop doing everything according to preference. Stop doing everything according to dogma. Stop doing everything, because your parents did it. This is how we do it as a family. This is how my generation feels. All of that is death to a Christian life. All of that. But then what do you replace it with? You don't know. So then you're in limbo a little bit, and it's funky. And see, that's what happened in chant. We went from form, here's what you sing, to this part where it's like, well, I haven't told you what to sing, but we're going to keep singing. And what happened, if you noticed, is some chaos. But then, didn't it? It came together, and it came together in a way that was in the flow of God. And if you had written that chant and orchestrated it, and were able to do exactly the same thing because you wanted to, it would have no power. And none. It would be dead works of the dead law. Dead works of the dead law. That's what it would be. Even if every single thing happened exactly the same way, it would be dead. And also, if you listen to what did happen outside of the Spirit, there's a member missing. And it's not going to sound very good. You're not going to like how it sounds if you listen outside of the Spirit. Some people are out of tune, and some people are out of rhythm, and why does that guy keep hitting that drum, and it's bugging me. There's just this. But then when you get in God, the final member of the group, and you're with God when you hear it, power. So that's the Christian life, to live by the Spirit. And the law it's like the beginning of the chant where we tell you what to sing. The law is good. It gets you somewhere in the vicinity of God's power. But then to live by the Spirit. And can't you see how rigid opinions about the way things ought to be is so deadly to that? It's not as if, I was talking to someone today about politics a little, which I don't do much, but just a little. And I was saying, I do have opinions, but I'm in the Spirit enough that I just don't care about them very much. Like I do have my opinions. It's good to have them. I have an opinion on stuff. I have a certain way I would like things to look, I guess. But I know for sure that I don't know the way humanity ought to unfold. I don't know that. You know who knows that? Only every single person involved aligning themselves to Christ. And what comes through them all, that's the only way we can know where we're going. It's the same in our group. I only know where we are, and I know how it looks now is not how it looks later. I know that much. But I can't know what it's going to look like because it has to live through us. It has to come through us. And if it's dictated, if I say, here's how it ought to be, if it's close, it's helpful, but it'll still be dead compared to it actually happening. What's amazing about it is I felt all this rebellion, when I realized, oh no, God actually has an opinion. I loved it when God was just a force. It's like no opinion. It just exists. Electricity, a kind of electricity, and I can harness it and wield it. I learned I can make my hands hot and cold at will back then. I learned these kung fu techniques for all this stuff, and I loved it then because really I was driving, so it was wonderful. But one day I was wiggling on something and I realized it was God's nose. And I'm like, I'm touching a person. This is a person. I am manipulating an intelligent being. And it made me uncomfortable. It made me queasy. I didn't really think I was touching God's nose, but that's figurative language, but you get it. I realized I am manipulating someone, not something. It gave me the creeps. It creeped me out. And then I thought, oh my gosh, God's personal. Whoa, that's so powerful. And I loved the idea. But then I realized that power has an opinion. And then I feel the immaturity. I'm running my own life, man. And I'd say run my life, but I wouldn't mean it. Not really. Not really. Just, on the best days, Peter, Don't wash my feet. Oh, you have to? Okay, wash my whole body. It's like, dude, just shut up. Just let him do what he wants to do. He knows what he's doing. So once you realize God has opinion, that's where you touch the rebellion that is at the core. The rebellion at the core is I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it the way I want to do it. I have preferences. And I think when you're enlightened, you still have some preferences. We're not Hindus here. We're not going to lose the self completely. You're going to just still have certain preferences, but you just aren't going to care about them much. You'll understand you're part of a larger whole. So then you could see how your basic state of being, the way you're moving through life, the way your parents taught you to move through life, the way your generation moves through life, the way your family line moves through life, or the way massage therapists move through life, whatever you've been taught, wherever you've been taught, is dead. It is dead. Most of it really good. Probably most of it really good. We know there's a bunch of garbage in a lot of it, but I'm just trying to say, it's not like we're saying, oh, everything's evil and only we have. No, it's all pretty good. It's a matter of when and how, and what intent, for what motivation. It's not enough to reach out and touch that puppy. That's not enough. It also has to be a blessing. It also has to be deep appreciation for that living being as a creation of God, revealing something about God to you. It's got to be alive with the Spirit. So we come into this path filled with ideas and ways of being, some of which is really good, but all of which is out of season. It's out of season. Just at the wrong time, the wrong way. And we get soft enough and humble enough to just start letting go of that. And If the Holy Spirit is mourning in us, we mourn with it. That was my big one. Was I had mastered joy. I was in joy 99.9% of the time, always. And it was a supernatural joy. It wasn't just happiness. I was in joy. And I mastered it. And then God started coming in with sorrow. And I wasn't available. I wasn't available for sorrow. And I know two people I'm working with right now that have no problem with sorrow, but they're unavailable for joy. It's funny. I just remembered one of the things I wanted to say. Okay, it's hard to say. You're a person, okay, and you have preferences about how you like things to be. And you get attached to them and sort of identified with those things, okay? So you get really defensive about them, like this is the way it is. And if someone's against it, you get a little heart uptick in your heartbeat and a little defensive, no, this is it. All I want to tell you is you could feel exactly that way about the opposing position. That's not what you really think. It's just what you think you think. It's not what you really care about. It's just what you think you care about. I mean, if it's clear right and wrong, I wouldn't put that in that category. But there's a bunch of stuff. It's like, you think that's how you are? It's not. It's just how you are. It's how you happen to be. But you could easily plug into an entirely different set of equally good values and feel totally differently about everything. And I practice that. I do that on purpose. The last one is driving. Everyone knows that I cannot stand road trips. I just can't stand them. I don't like to drive. Here's how I thought about it before. The road, first of all, is so ugly. It's just like gray. It's just gray. And then you get out on the road and there's semis, everything. Big, dirty, ugly semis. And you could, if you don't, I got to make sure like I'm a Nazi about like the air conditioning can't be bringing in outside air because then you get these fumes. So it's like you got to recirculate the air inside the car and you there's no freedom, you're just stuck in this thing. And I despised road trips. But then recently it occurred to me that my daughter's going to go to college in about less than 4 years, and we won't have her around. And that's just heartbreaking. And it's so much joy, go live, man. Leave us in the dirt. Come back and visit from your better place, like totally, man. Do that. But also, there's only a little time left. Only a little. And then it occurred to me, I want to take her to these. I want to take her on road trips. I want to go to national parks with her. But I hate driving. I thought I'll fly, and I thought I can't afford to fly to 18 places in the next 3.5 years. I just can't do that. I can't do that. Hotels, every trip's, it's not going to happen. It's not in the cards. So it's either I decide I love driving, or I don't get to do these things I want to show her. That's it. So I just let it go. Now, I'm not saying that was easy, but I just did. And it helped being around my cousin who, we went on this trip, a road trip, which I despised driving the whole time. I'm not saying I was miserable. I just don't like to drive. But she said, because she doesn't have enough money to fly to all these places either, or stay in hotels all the time. Okay, she can't do it. She's not loaded. So, okay, but she's been to Florida, Canada, the Redwood Forest. She's been everywhere in the country. I said, how did you do it? She said, we drove. And she has like a crossover, and her and her son would sleep in the car together. And I just realized everything I want to show my daughter, I can. I just have to get over driving. So now I love driving. I love it. I absolutely love it. I could drive 10 hours straight. Doesn't even bug me. I love it. But but I had a way it was. But then I see how arbitrary it all is. All these things we think, we believe and feel about things, it's all a lie. I mean, it's not even wrong. It's just how rigid we are. You really can't shift consciousness and do something different. That's a problem. You can't be a different way. That's a problem. I started as a hippie, then Jesus showed me to be very conservative and calm and super grounded. I became that. Now I'm a mix of the two. Everything you are, your positions you hold, they're just a very small percentage of everything. Very small percentage of everything. Okay, but they're deadly because, not for the road trip. I mean, that's neat. It's so neat that we're going to do this now. That we're getting a little minivan, like less cool vehicle than the Subaru, but this minivan we can sleep in, so that's going to be great for no hotel fees, and we're just going to do it, so that's all great. But that's not, it isn't nothing. My daughter and wife to have those memories, that's everything. And we're also old, we're going to die sooner than most parents, so we want her to have a lot of memories with us, trying to do something for her. Okay, but that's not it, though. That is it. That is it. On the planet, that's it. But also think about this. God is always new. It's a paradox of the experience of God. God is simple and unchanging. But the thing that's always unchanging is God is always new. So it's like God is simple, but everything you can experience in the universe, or any possible universes, all of it, is always happening in God all the time, infinitely. So now think about how any rigid state of consciousness is the enemy of that. Think about that. That is the enemy. Anyway, it's got to be. We're not talking about sin here. Sin is out. We don't sin. There's right and wrong. But boy, in the realm of the right and good and true, there's endless beauty. Endless. And to be rigid and to be stuck and to have these opinions, these ways it's got to be, that's not you. That's not you. That's you fallen from grace. That's not you. You are something because God made you. So there's something there that's real and true. But it doesn't really hate driving. It certainly doesn't hate certain races. Like that's egregiously far off from it. It doesn't hate any colors. It's open to kind of everything in a way. And you'll still be you, whatever you really are. But without all that rigidity, we won't even know what that is. With all that rigidity in place, we don't know what that is. Think of boundless supernatural joy. And then think of control. Fear. Shame. So the Holy Spirit is pulling on you all the time. In this talk, it makes it sound like it's all about expansion, but we know it's pulling on you many ways. A different talk, a different energy of the talk. But God is pulling on you. God is never not leading you somewhere in your consciousness. Let it. Let it. It is in God, in the more direct states of union with God. It's really nice. There's no way to say it. There is no way to put it in words. It is so alive, and so good, and so true, so loving, so joyous, so infinite. It's everything you could ever imagine all at once. And there's no way you really want to go right instead. It's hilarious we could possibly think that. It's hilarious. And even God even likes right. It's like it's just so pathetic the way we get hung up on stuff. Half the things I wouldn't give up to come to God, God didn't take when I came. Right now there's power. Right now. It doesn't matter if you feel it, it matters if you are open to it. Lots of power. Whether you feel it or not, Christ is here. And more like at the Transfiguration, revealing his glory. And that more cosmic type of consciousness is bleeding into the center now. I'm seeing the effects, even people who don't think they notice. I'm just seeing the changes you would expect to see in certain people if it was entering their life. Just say yes. Just say yes. Give up control. Ease up, man. The worst that could happen to you is you die. So what? It, I had this dream a few years ago. I was in an airplane and it was crashing. And I don't know if this exists in the real world, but the seat was facing the rear of the plane. So the plane's going down, nose down, and so that means I'm going to land in the ground backwards, you know. And as my body hit and disintegrated, I turned around because I guess the momentum, or I turned in my soul around and went, yeah! Like, let's go! Like, that's the worst that could happen to you? Freaking heaven? Come on. It's okay. Everything's okay. Everything's okay. Okay, now let me at the risk of being annoying, let me just say, the chanting, okay? Listen to that. Use that. I'm not gonna like try to make it a technique and every day's gotta be this way, but I had a couple of days where I listened to it twice in a row in the morning and then went into my regular quiet meditation after, and 2 days in a row, it was spectacularly powerful. There is power in that chant. You guys put it there from God, right through you. So at the risk of being annoying, I'll once again try to say why it matters. And anything I say about chant is what we're doing in band. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. I thought it would be so much harder to teach, but it turns out when you're just singing and banging stuff, there's no skill learning curve. So it turns out it's really easy. You just fall into it. But in band, it's hard because you got to hit notes that are somewhat accurate. I mean, not that we would be called an accurate band, but you got to be somewhat accurate, And this has got to blend better somehow. But listen to this. So I said it already. I just want to say it one more time. Oh, okay, an analogy. I tell you, you've got to make a beautiful sand mandala, and I tell you exactly how it's got to look, okay? And you do it, man, and maybe like the Buddhists, right? Just like to the most minute, you're making a sand mandala, and it's freaking awesome. That's awesome. Or you could stretch paper over a bass speaker and let it hum at a certain frequency and drop that sand on, and that sand will vibrate into gorgeous mandala patterns that are living and vibrating. Dogma, not the Buddhists, just the making it happen, Dogma, living by the Spirit. Dogma, living by the Spirit. So what happened in the chant is we let it go, and then people are like, I don't like this chaos, it bugs me. Calm down. Calm down, man. You're trying to get into an altered state of consciousness. You can't stay where you are. You got to loosen up, or you'll never get there. You got to loosen up. You got to loosen up. Shake it off. Sometimes that chaos is how you shake it off. You shake it. Our band will get really weird sometimes. We're usually playing like garbage before that. We get through that cycle of it, and then we play something beautiful. Often. We're shaking it off. We're shaking that off. So that chant, it got chaotic, and I don't think it got that chaotic, but you might think that, I'm used to it. I like the chaos. But it gets that way. But then that's everyone loosening up, and then the Holy Spirit is living through everyone in the room, just nudging them, and then a harmony and a beauty comes through, orchestrated by something other than us. This is why the Jews kept saying, we want a king. And God kept saying, you don't want a king. I will lead you. And they kept saying, but we want a king. Just give us a king. And God said, you don't want a king. I will lead you. But they just begged for it till God conceded. He gave them all these kings. Some were great and some were terrible. But that's the dogma way. The way God wanted them was, I'll live through you, and if you will all listen, I will take you somewhere nothing else can take you to. And that is the spiritual life. That is the spiritual life. Here I am, God. I give you my life. Make me homeless, make me wealthy, make me single, make me married. I don't care. Just whatever you want. Poor, rich, it doesn't matter. I give it to you. Just let me be in your will. What would happen if you tried an experiment and said, God, I give up on everything. Whatever you want through me, I will do. What if you did that? What would happen? The answer to that is how your life unfolds as you make that commitment every day. That's the answer. And it might look just about the same, but be filled with power. It might look different too. I don't know. I'm just saying.